Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. I'm Bob Wells. My guest today is Steve Carroll, artist, author and teacher. In today's show, we hear how a career and lifelong love of art has led Steve to use his talents by helping change the lives of young people in Kolkata, India. Steve tells us about what life is like for people, especially for children on the streets of Kolkata, where poverty, drugs and organised crime are rife. We talk about how Steve finally went to Kolkata in 2013 and how after experiencing poverty at first hand, he came to love the city and its people. He discovered that his talent for art was not just a commodity, but a way to positively influence young people's lives for the better. Later on in the show notes, we provide links to where you can see Steve's paintings and learn more about the charities that are doing so much to improve people's lives. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Bob. Good to hear from you.
Great to have you on the show, Steve. So today we have Steve Carroll, heavily into art, teaches art, does art, also an author, and he does some fantastic charity work in India with a group which we'll hear about. But before that, Steve, a little bit about you. Can you tell us a bit about what you're doing and what you've been doing over the last few years?
Yeah, sure. Well, my main income is I'm a graphic designer, and I also do illustration. And but what happened in about the late 2007, I decided I needed another string to my bow because graphic design can go very up and down, and I was just fed up with not having anything to do. So I did a teacher training course, and I became an art teacher and an art history teacher. And on top of that, I also do my own artwork, of course, and my own illustration work. And I also write, not so much now, but I have had some books published, yes.
Fantastic. So we can obviously talk a bit about where people can get some of these works of art from you later on in the programme,
yes.
If that's okay. What about your books that you did? Was it the Riddler's Fair series?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about what they're about?
Yeah, sure. Well, what they are, they're actually what we call graphic novels, which is a posh name for comic books, but they're kind of high quality books. And the idea came about just after 9/11 when people were talking about the war on terror and things like that. And a group of us thought to ourselves, well, we've had that. It was called the Crusades, and it wasn't very good, and we're still living with the fallout from that. And so we wanted to do a graphic novel series, which was aimed at teenagers, but it was all about the Crusades and trying to draw parallels and saying to people, this wasn't a terribly good idea. The idea wasn't to really preach, because I think people can tell when you're really trying to get a message across. We used. It was the actual story was all about alchemy and the hunt for the alchemical secret, but we used that as a kind of a metaphor for power and money and all that type of thing, and that's what the series was about. I am afraid to say only the first two are actually available. And they are on, you can get those on Amazon. Riddler's Fair. Fair is Fayre. But we did write a third one, which is yet to be published.
Okay, well, we can put those in the show notes later if people are interested in having a look at those. So the big thing that you've been doing recently over the last few years that I've noticed is this charity work in India.
Yes.
Particularly in Kolkata.
Yes.
Just for listeners, what is the difference between Calcutta and Kolkata?
Well, Calcutta, and we all know about Calcutta, the black hole of Calcutta and all that type of thing. That name is an anglicised version of the name, and it was called Calcutta by the British during the British Empire. But in 2001, they officially changed it back to its Indian name, which is Kolkata, which is Kolkata.
Tell me how you got involved with this, Steve.
Well, I've always been fascinated by India. I've always felt that India it's a country with a totally different and unique culture. We all know Indian food, Indian music, the Indian landscape, Indian religion, everything about it just feels different and unique. And I was always fascinated by the country. And what happened was during it was 2013 was when I first went out there. During 2012, I was being very successful selling my prints, my digital prints, and I was earning quite a lot of money from them. But I always thought to myself, it would be nice to do something with this, which is more than just earning money. I've always seen art as being something that can actually do something. It's not just a commodity. And I met a chap. He actually came to our local church. A chap who was from this charity called Emmanuel Ministries Calcutta. And he was talking about how in the area of Calcutta, or Kolkata, I should say, where they were working, they did some work with prostitutes. And basically what they did was all these women who were having to do this, this dreadful, demeaning act, they basically taught them how to run their own businesses. And now in that area of Kolkata, there are no prostitutes because they don't have to do that because they've all got their own business. And I was so excited about this. I thought this was fantastic. This is really life-changing. I'd love to be part of this. And I just went up to this guy and I showed him my, I had one of my cards on me that has one of my artworks. And I just said, I'd really like to come to Kolkata and actually illustrate the city, and anything I sell, I'll give the money to you to help you with your work. And he was pretty, struck by this, but he thought I wasn't going to do it because these people get so many sort of, good intention, people coming up to them with ideas and then they don't follow them through. But I did follow it through. And in 2013, I went out to India. I'd never been to anywhere as exotic as that before. And it was a trip that absolutely changed my life.
Did you go with anybody else when you went to India, Steve?
Yeah, it was a group of friends, a group of people from the church I went to. It was interesting because most people go out there. I've got a friend who's a pharmacologist. I've got a friend who's a builder, an IT expert, and they went out there and they could help with, building projects. They could help with medical because this Emmanuel Ministries has so many different wings. It's a medical facility. It helps people get off drugs. It's an educational facility. It's a business advisory. It does so many practical things. And all my friends had all these, practical things they could do. And I thought, well, what can I do? I'm an artist. I felt a little bit, what I did was a bit superficial. But what happened was I just had this idea. I took out an A4 pad of paper and, all my drawing equipment. And I sat down with these children. These children were in, slum children, some of these very, very poor kids. And I just sat down with them and I said, can I draw your portrait? And, they sat there and I drew portraits of them and they were absolutely overjoyed. And you've got to realize these kids don't have photographs of themselves. They don't have mobile phones where they can take selfies. They have no record of themselves at all. And for someone to sit down and actually draw them and actually, take the time to draw them and give that drawing as a gift to them, they were over the moon. And to me, it was just such a small thing, but it made me see my art in a different way. I mean, one of the things people say about art is it's the affirmation of the value of an individual. And in a slum situation, to affirm someone's value is quite a remarkable thing. And I realised that I had something that was valuable, something I could use. So that's what I did. I also taught some art lessons, and when I came back, I did a series of prints, digital artworks of the city, and I sold those, and people were really interested in them. I had exhibitions, and all the money I didn't keep anything for myself. All the money I made, I just sent it straight out to them, and it's been great.
And are those art prints still able? Are people still able to get those?
Yes. I've got a website which is simply called stevecarrollssussex.com.
Yeah, we'll put those on the show notes later on so that people can have access to them. Steve, for people who haven't been to India, myself included, could you sort of describe a little bit about what your feelings were when you first went to Kolkata and what's it like there? Right.
Well, first of all, Kolkata is not a holiday destination. It's nothing like the Marigold Hotel, those films. It's not like that. Kolkata is very much an industrial. There's a lot of business there, and it's a very, very poor city. And when I flew there in 2013, I got out of the plane. The airport was more like a bus station than an airport. Now the terminal is very nice. They built a new one. But in 2013, it was really like a bus station. And you came out, as soon as you came out, there were people, elderly beggars, people coming up to you and asking for money. And people were saying, don't give them money, because very often the money doesn't go to them. It goes to some cartel, some gang lord somewhere, it takes all the money. And we drove for about 45 minutes, an hour to where we were staying. And all I saw was poverty. All I saw was people sitting on the streets. I saw, squalor. I was absolutely overwhelmed with what it was like. Now, the way I explain it to people is if you're walking through any town, London, anywhere, and you see someone sleeping in a doorway, you look at them and you think it's sad, but you pass them and you find yourself thinking about other things, getting it out of your mind. That's what I realized I did. When you go to a city like Kolkata, you can't do that. You for about an hour, all you're seeing is poverty, and all the while you're there, you're seeing poverty, and you cannot walk away from it. And the first reaction I had when I got to the place where I was staying, I just sat on the end of my bed and I thought, what on earth am I doing here? What have I done? This is terrible. I want to go home. I honestly wanted to go back. The shock was just overwhelming. But I have to say that once you get to know the people, once you get to talk to people, instead of seeing people as being like a problem in poverty, all these labels, as soon as you begin to see the people as people, it changes. And it's by, the end of my time there, I was loving it. I didn't want to come home. I was just like, counting, counting the days until I could go back there.
And what sort of habitation? Where do people live? Or particularly the children. Where would they live?
Well, there are different types of abode. There's people who literally live on the pavement, and you can be walking past. At the end of the place where I was living, I was staying. There was a Kentucky Fried Chicken. They have all these type of places. And outside there was a tarpaulin with a family just sitting on this tarpaulin begging. So I didn't see any men. It was mostly women and about 3 or 4 children. And then what would happen is when it got dark, they would just pull the tarpaulin over them, and that was where they lived. They slept literally on the pavement, and that was it. And then you go into
so very dangerous conditions.
Gosh, yeah, it is. Very easily you hear stories about children being just snatched and being sold into all horrible things. Sweatshops, just begging for a gang. There's lots of gangs out there getting into drugs. It's really horrendous. And then you also get 2 different types of slums. You get the official slums and the unofficial slums. Now, the official slums are built by the government, and they're just like rows, a whole area of concrete sheds. And, people make their homes in them, and they're very proud of them. They're very clean people, they're constantly washing all the time. You see washing hanging up and people washing their clothes. And then there's the unofficial slums, which are where they just basically, they just build their own slums out of tarpaulin and bamboo, these very thick bamboo canes they've got out there. And they just, it's almost like when you're a kid and you make a camp or a den. It's like that, but that's where people live, and they cook and they sleep.
Do the people seem fairly happy?
Yes, that's the remarkable thing. It is really incredible. It is. It's a real. I've heard somebody said, I know of a man who grew up in India but went to work as a philosophy lecturer in America. And he said that he was born in the poorest country and now lives in the richest country, and he sees more depression and in the rich country than he does in the poor country. It is a real life lesson to meet these people.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about. Obviously, the charity part that you do is heavily involved with children.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what life's like, say, for a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old before they go to. I mean, I presume they go to school at some point.
Yes.
Do they?
Well, you see, one of the things they run a free school which is called the Pavement Club, which is literally for children who live on the pavement. And a child will be born, be raised. It's difficult to believe, but literally not have a home, be on, not have, they don't have nappies or anything like that. These kids, they're washed with, I've seen children being washed with like wastewater coming out of another building and things like that. They have no education. They can't read or write. And then they go to this thing called the Pavement Club, which is actually it's kind of like a stage set in the corner of the grounds. You know, it's not a building that you with a door, but they just go into this kind of shelter and they're taught there, and they're taught to read. All the education is in English because they think that's the best thing for children to have. You know, because it's an international language, so it gives them an advantage to be able to speak English and write English. And all sorts of things, maths and all the type of things children love doing. Singing, doing art, painting, that type of thing.
Yeah. So basically, although they're brought up in hardship, all the children have an opportunity to go to school.
They have through this charity, not all the children, obviously, and I think that there are schools which you have to pay for. I don't think they have like free education like we have. It's actually you have to pay for it. But this charity, and remember, this isn't the only charity. I just happen to know these people. There's lots of marvelous charities, great works, great people.
So this charity you mentioned earlier, this charity you mentioned earlier is the Emmanuel Ministries, Calcutta.
That's right, EMC. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the actual charity itself. When did it form? Who's involved with it? What does it do?
Well, there was a lovely man called Vijay and his wife Premila, and Vijay was actually a professional artist. This is interesting. He was a professional cartoonist.
Yeah. And
he was he and his wife were from quite a middle-class background. Now, you've got to realise that in India, you don't have sort of in this country, the classes all sort of merge into each other. I think more and more it goes. I mean, you get like working. It's difficult sometimes to tell. I don't know whether I'm working class or middle class, and then you get, but in India, it's you get the super rich, you get the middle classes, the professional people, and then it's the street people. It's the very, very poor. There's a gulf between middle class and the very poor. And this gentleman, Vijay, he was from the middle classes, but he felt that he was a Christian believer, and he felt the thing that he should be doing with his life is not to pursue a professional career, but he should be helping his fellow countrymen, the people that he was walking past all the time. So he decided to go and talk to the poor people. He would take like 25 kids to a restaurant, buy a meal for them, which they'd never had, and he would just listen to their stories and find out what their lives were like. The other thing he did is he put an advert in a paper, and he just said, if anybody's got any problems and they need somebody, a friendly ear just to talk to, then I'm here. See me at this particular church. And there was a church which had a little office on the side, and he rented that office. And the day after that newspaper advert came out, there was a queue right around the block of people who wanted to speak to him. And there was just so much need. There were so many problems that people weren't, fake confronting. So he basically set up this charity. It took a lot of work. Vijay, he passed away in the late noughties, late 2000s. He had a heart condition. I never actually met him. But he was. They have just to give you some idea of how he was considered. In India, you don't have burials generally because it's a Hindu country, and what you have is cremations. But there are special like Christian and Muslim cemeteries, and you are taken, you are buried in a special cemetery. But there are only two people in the whole of modern India who have been allowed to be buried not in a special cemetery, but in their own property. One of those was Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who was a friend of Vijay's, and the other one was Vijay himself. And that gives you some idea of how he was considered by the Indian people as being a real saint.
Kept in very high esteem.
Yes. Now I never met him. He passed away before I got involved with this. But his wife, Premila, we all call her Auntie Prem. She's an absolutely wonderful woman, and I consider her a friend. Is one of my greatest. It's something. It's always a great pride to be able to be her friend because she is a just absolutely remarkable person. Yeah.
So you got involved with the charity.
Yep.
You heard about the charity through your church.
Yep.
How many times have you been to India?
I've been about 3 times.
Okay. And each time you go, your particular initiative is the art element of it with the children. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, the first time I went, to be honest, I didn't know what to expect. And I really went out. I kind of went out just as an experience. I just wanted to experience it and find out because I knew nothing about it. But I did lots of drawings of the children, and I taught a few art lessons, which went down very well. There was one lesson where they said to me, "Would you teach the staff at our centre, where the charity runs from?"
Yeah.
And I looked and I thought, well, there's about 12 staff. I think I can do that. But what they didn't tell me was they'd actually announced to all the schools in Kolkata that a famous English artist was in India. Would you like to come and hear him? And I suddenly went into this hall and there were 200 kids. And I'd only sort of prepared to sort of like do almost no bigger than a 1-to-1 lesson. So I had to think on my feet, and I did this lesson, and it went down very well. I taught them how to do portraits, and it went very well, and the kids really enjoyed it. I think it was interesting just for them. I mean, they have very good art teachers, obviously, but I think it was interesting for them to hear from a Western perspective. I mean, things like I had to talk through an interpreter, and a guy interpreted what I was saying into Bengali. And there isn't a word in Bengali for perspective. So when I was trying to explain perspective, they didn't have a word for that. And that was really interesting because it didn't do art.
How would you get that across?
Well,
I was going to say, how would you actually explain perspective?
Well, I basically, I looked at, because everywhere you go, you have these fans on the ceiling, because it's very hot out there. And I basically showed them how to draw the fans and how to make it, I had to do it, visually. They didn't understand, like when we were at school, we were taught about single point perspective and the vanishing point. That they didn't understand. They don't have that in their culture. So I had to just demonstrate it for them. But it was that was a real eye opener.
Yeah, I bet it was. You mentioned earlier on that when you got to the airport, it was suggested that you didn't give children money, the beggars, because of they could be related to some sort of gang lord or mafia. Yeah. Have you had any experience with any of the criminal elements directly?
Yeah, I have. I mean, one of the guys, there's a lovely chap there called Timothy, and he was in one of the gangs, and he was a drug addict. Many of the drug addicts they help have been involved with gangs. And it's very easy to be judgmental, but when you're a poor person on the street and joining a gang seems like, a fast track, way to get out of poverty, I can understand how that must be a temptation. He was a reformed character, but I also met people, there were lots of scams going on, and they often target white people because they think we're very rich, which we are, I found out. But, there was a gentleman who came up to me and he said to me that he was a farmer, and in a flood his entire farm had been washed away. Could we help? And this was quite late at night in the evening. He was there with his young son, and he looked in a bad way. And I started talking to him about how we could help, what we could do. And I said, look, could you speak to the people who run the charity, because they can help? And his eyes lit up. He said, they can help me. And I said, yes. And he was really interested. And as he was, opening up to me, I was telling him where the charity was. Suddenly out of the shadows, all these sort of guys, these rather wealthy looking guys, suddenly appeared and descended upon us. And they weren't happy. And it was obvious that this was a scam. And what these guys did, they set up this poor guy to be, the victim, to try and get money from white people. And I realized that when I said, we can help you, he was more interested in getting out of this situation. But he was that was very scary, actually, and I kind of sort of ended the meeting because I thought there's no point in this. I'm going to get into really bad trouble doing this. So you just have to leave it. But the guy knew that there were people to speak to get out of that. Yeah.
So in terms of the children that are helped by the charity. They get some schooling. Yep. People like your good self go along and teach them other things and that. What happens as they start going up through school? So I guess they go in at about when they're age 5 or something.
Yeah, they go in.
How does it progress? Tell me how it progresses.
Yeah, they go in age 5. There's a thing called the Pavement Club, and when then they can go on to. There's a very large school simply called the Emmanuel School, and that is just like it's just like a school here. They've got everything. They've got library. They haven't quite got as many computers and things like that as we have, but it's generally like a school like you and I went to, and it's it's very old-fashioned. The children are so well behaved. It's not like they don't sort of answer the teachers back or anything like that. That it's quite lovely from that point of view. There's a lot of respect for the teachers. I just say this: you get stories of wealthy middle-class people trying to get their kids into this school, which is really set up for poor children.
Really?
Yeah, because the education is so good. So that's rather good. And then what happens, and this is something which I'm more directly involved with, is the then question is, what do you do when you've got a kid who's been rescued from poverty, all sorts of dreadful options they could have had. Now they've got an education, they've got like the equivalent of GCSEs, and what do they do next? And the project which I'm more closely involved with is one called Pursuit International, and Pursuit International actually sponsors young people who've been through the school system, and it gets them now into college, and it gets them into starting their own careers. And that's okay. So that there is help for them, at that very, very important transitional period as well. Because the simple fact is, you do hear stories of young kids who've been born in a brothel. Their parents, their mother was a prostitute. That's all they've ever known. They get an education, they get opportunities, but they then think, to be honest, the risk of going out and trying to make it myself in the world when I know that I can make money in prostitution, they go to prostitution. These are the stories you hear, or in drugs. I don't want to sort of overplay. I mean, the prostitution thing is very shocking to us. I don't want to overplay that, because that's not all that they. That's not the only option. But there are other options which are unpleasant.
Pursuit International is another charity that you're involved with, and in summary, that charity helps people on the path to college and a job after they've had their schooling. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Pursuit International is a part of Emmanuel Ministries, but it's actually, the interesting thing is actually the headquarters is round the corner from where I live in Worthing, and
oh really?
Yeah, because it's run by a wonderful Indian guy called Janapriẏa Sheikh, and Janae actually grew up in a slum. He tells me terrible stories. His father died in the slum because of the terrible diseases, the lack of sanitation. And he was helped through Emmanuel Ministries. He went to school through that. And he was able to do business studies at the University of Manchester in this country, which is quite remarkable. It's not often heard of something like a boy from his background. And so he's got a degree in business studies. And now what he's done is he set up this, he married an English girl who was a friend of mine. I was a friend of the family, and they live around the corner. And it's so weird because the first time I met him, it was in the middle of Calcutta, and now he's married and he lives around the corner from me. But
that's an amazing coincidence.
Yes, I know. But that means that I've got a connection. So I often will do things. I'm often asked to speak at art societies about this whole thing of working in India, and I get paid, and any money I get, I give this all to Pursuit. So it's like
that's a wonderful thing to do.
It's just an easy way of funneling the money into doing something great. Yeah.
So have you seen any? Are there any case studies of children that have gone through this system?
Yes.
This wonderful system, and actually, what sort of, tell us a little bit about how some of those children have developed.
Yes. Okay. If I can tell you the story, there's a wonderful young girl called Amorshi, and she was from a very difficult background. I think there was a lot of violence in her family background, and she was staying. There was a home which was opened for poor girls in India. It's called the Pauline Bevan home, and that was basically like a place, a children's home. It's now open to boys as well. But it was at one time just open to girls, and she was there. She went to school. She did very well. She did remarkably well at school, and she's now studying at the University of Mumbai, and she's studying psychology. And I'm still in contact with her. Wow. I still, talk to us, find out how things are going. And her ambition is basically to work with the poor people, as a counsellor, and to use her training as a psychologist to actually help the young people.
Fantastic story.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So the charity Pursuit International, who do this last bit of the kids' education and get them into a career, in terms of numbers, what's the success rate of the kids that have gone through, who actually come out of this?
Well, it's a relatively new one. I mean, as far as I know, I don't know if anybody who's dropped out. I don't know that there's anybody who has gone back to their previous way of life. It's a small charity. It basically they sponsor about 10 children at a time, and they go through this program where they're basically sponsored. They're helped through into college courses, and then out the other side into the careers. Obviously, you can't hold their hand forever. They've got the whole point is to make it so they can make their own way. But there's been no dropout as far as I know. Nobody's actually not failed. Everybody's been very grateful for it, and as far as I know, it's 100% success rate.
And Steve, on a more macro level, we hear a lot. We're obviously very rich in the West compared with some of these people who live in those sort of cities in India, like Calcutta and Bombay. And we also hear that economically, India is now, one of the new fast-growing economies in the world. Are there any signs that the situation in some of these cities, particularly Kolkata, is improving for these people? Or is it getting worse? What's happening at the moment?
Well, it's a very sensitive subject because, I've seen people put things on Facebook. When I've tried to organise, I did a charity dinner recently for this, and you do get people saying, why are we doing this? Why are we putting our hands in our pockets for India? India has its own space program, for goodness sake. Why are we giving it to Indians? Shouldn't they? Now, the problem is, and I say this with caution, because I don't in any way want to be rude about India is a country I love, and I don't want to be in any way rude, but there is a different history. You have, a country which is very much a Hindu country, and it has for centuries had the caste system. And if you are one of the untouchables, what they call the Dalit, which is basically the people I work with, all the people I work with are the Dalit, the untouchable class. There are some people who they don't even want the shadow of a Dalit, an untouchable person, to cross their shadow. You keep away from them. Now, even though the caste system is something that's not very fashionable, there is now legislation where you cannot make a legal decision on the basis of caste in India anymore. Even then, it is still in existence. And the problem is, yes, you do get your Indian billionaires, and you do get people who are doing incredibly well, but the money doesn't filter down to the poor people, because there is still this attitude that they are untouchable, even if they say it's not. And I have to be careful here, because now it sounds like I'm criticising the country, but I'm afraid the hard fact is these people on the streets, they will not see any of that money. Nothing will be built for them. It will have no effect upon them, and so that's why we still have to keep doing what we're doing.
You're right. I mean, obviously in the UK we had our industrial revolution, 1760 onwards. They've had a different they're evolving in a different way. So we can't judge that.
No, you can't.
But nevertheless, I guess in time the situation improve. But in the meantime, there are kids out there, families out there with a lot of difficulty, and we need to help them when we can. I think it's great what you're doing, Steve. Where can people find a little bit more about what you're doing and the charities that you've been talking about?
Well, the best place to go, there is the charity Pursuit International, and if you just Google that, you'll get onto their website, and you can find out all sorts of things. How you can help. You can run events, The other one is EMC, Emmanuel Ministries Calcutta, which is the actual parent charity, which is in Kolkata, I should say. And that's basically, just Emmanuel with, how do you spell that? It's got no L-E at the end. It's just one L at the end. Emmanuel Ministries Calcutta. Yeah. They still say it the old way, Calcutta with a C. You can get onto their website and you can just see what we do. But, I like to encourage really creative things for Pursuit International. We've had sort of themed meals, evening meals that have done really well. We've had raffles, auctions of artwork, quiz nights. all sorts of things. One guy did a sponsored wheelbarrow race, and they raised about 1,400 quid. It's remarkable what people will
Sounds
do.
Great.
Yeah, it is great, and it's great fun, and it's great to feel part of a community like that. And you get to know the young people. They're very grateful, and you get to know them as friends as well. And it's just a wonderful thing to be involved with.
Yeah. So if people want to give a donation to the charity, they can do that.
Yes.
And I guess the other thing we can do, and we can put these on the show notes, is show off some of your artwork.
Yeah, sure.
What about if people want to go a bit further and they actually want to get involved with going out to India and stuff? Can they, is that something the charity can help with?
Well, they can do that. I mean, you can go out and, Emmanuel Ministries are very, they love to have people going over there. You can stay. I mean, I've stayed in I stayed in a hostel the first 2 times, but the third time I stayed in a hotel. Somebody, very kind person, paid for me to stay in a hotel. And frankly, I'd rather stayed in the hostel, because the hotel was one of these places that had terrible viruses in the air conditioning. And I came away with an illness for about a month afterwards. That sounds like I'm putting people off, but you can talk to Emmanuel Ministries. But you see, the thing is, there are other charities. You don't have to just help the one I'm involved with. I think if you Google, you will find. I think there's also the VSO, which is Voluntary Services Organisation. There's lots of places where you can help. But please feel free to get in contact with us. Pursuit International has an office in this country, just around the corner from me, and Emmanuel Ministries would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah. So have you got any plans to go back out to India?
Yes, I have. As soon as this pandemic is over, my plan is to go. I was hoping to go over in February, but it might be more October next year. Yeah. I do want to go back. I mean, I feel like there's part of me that is I've left in India. I have to go back. It's the most inspiring place I've ever been to. It's weird, even with the poverty there. The poverty, it does get me down, but the hope builds me up. The hope that I can make some difference. That is what keeps me going there. And I just love the people. I love the culture. They're wonderful.
And the human spirit comes through.
Yes, absolutely. It is remarkable. It's an incredible life lesson, and I would recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, Steve, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah,
and I think you've brought home a lot of very interesting subject matter to people.
Yeah.
And like I say, I'll put all this on the show notes, and people can have a look for themselves. So thanks very much.
That's okay. Marvellous. It's great to be in contact again.
My thanks go to today's guest, Steve Carroll, artist and author. If you would like to see Steve's artwork, find out more about the charities mentioned in the show, and discover where you can obtain a book in the Riddler's Fair series, please see the show notes for details. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope that you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe to the show for future episodes, and if you like what you hear, please rate and review. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.